Have you ever danced with your father? My Truth by Sammy Kay. My father and I shared the same name. Our resemblance to each other was uncanny. I did not appreciate that until much later in life. I learned more about him during his eulogy than I knew during his lifetime. As I sat in the front pew of the tiny chapel of the Fort Sill Army Base, my tears freely flowed because now there would never be a chance to experience the many joys of being his daughter that my heart had always yearned for. My parents never married. I was raised by my great aunt and uncle. They were my mama and my daddy. My father entered the army the same year I was born. Perfect timing, huh? And yes, I did ask him the obvious question. He didn't give me an answer, but, uh, well, he did, but it was much later. He was actually in Korea at the time of my birth. He decided to make the military his career. He spent most of his service time in Germany. When he returned to the States and came home to visit his parents, he would visit me also. I never knew when he would show up. It was not uncommon for him to come to my school, and I would be called to the office where he would be waiting. I was an extremely shy child, so he never knew how excited I was to see him. My excitement would last for weeks. Unfortunately, years separated his visits. We never said much, but our personalities were so similar, they were comfortable silences between us. He was always neat, neat as a pin, and well dressed, sometimes in his army uniform. I was fascinated. He always had on a watch, and the first gift he ever gave me was a watch sent from Germany. I was 8 years old, and yes, I love watches. I have a sizable collection, but sadly, I don't have one of his. He liked Volkswagens and Buicks, the first car I owned with my then husband. Well, bought with my then husband was a 1971 red Super Beetle. My father owned what I think was a 1960 or 61 gray bug he bought while in Germany. Somewhere between the age of 10 and 11, my relationship with my father changed. This particular night, I had just told Mama, that I wanted a pineapple malt from Dairy Queen. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was my father. I was, of course, glad to see him, but when he asked if I wanted to go and get something to eat, I vehemently said no. Mama, who was surprisingly fond of my father, quickly told him that I had just said that I wanted a malt. He surprised all of us by grabbing me by both my arms and declaring that you do not have to be afraid of me. I am your daddy. All of my shyness and the fear that I did not even know I had simply went away, never to return. We went to Dairy Queen, and I enjoyed the best pineapple malt I ever had. The year I turned 12, one of my father's friends came to my house to tell me that my father had gotten married. His friend said that he was afraid to tell me. I've never understood why. I was definitely not used to adults being afraid of children for any reason. Perhaps he knew how sad I would be, because I was extremely sad. I felt as if I had just found him. And now he would have a real family, possibly with children. And once again, I would be simply an option in his life, not a priority. I didn't exactly think those words, but that is exactly how I felt. You see, even as a child, I knew that my parents did not have the emotional responsibility of my care. I was not a priority for either one of them. By age 6, I had accepted this fact and was able to understand that I was right where I was supposed to be. I thank the Lord for that today. Knowing this did not change the fact that I love my father. I was fascinated by the mystique that seemed to surround him. Soon after his marriage, he and his wife had a daughter. Of course, I was praying for a boy. I knew that my sister would have a part of him that I would never have. He remained a distant part of my life. My children were his only grandchildren, but the time they spent together was not enough to form a real relationship. They did, however, seem to enjoy the time they had. Sometimes when I look at my kids and my grandchildren, I wish that he had had an opportunity to know her. I wish he knew them. It's not that he didn't have it, it just didn't happen. The year, several months actually, before he died, I woke up one morning needing to talk to him. I think we both operated like that. Um, he would call me out of the blue, I would call him out of the blue, and we would talk. It was always comfortable. I called, and we talked long enough to sort of catch up. During the conversation, he told me he had a doctor's appointment the following day. I fussed at him about his smoking, which is something I always did. And he told me that he had stopped quite a while ago. I just didn't know it. He was taken directly from that doctor's appointment to the hospital. He had become critically ill. By the time I reached Oklahoma, he was in what I thought was a semi conscious state, but I'm not sure. I'm not. For the first time, I looked at this man who was my father. I could finally see how much we looked alike. As I gently rubbed his head, I could feel his hair texture that was the exact same as mine. I really hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about my hair texture until then. I always wondered why my hands were so different. As I held his hand, I found the answer. Our complexion was all the same. For the first time, I felt the connection that a parent and child should feel. I was able to talk to him and tell him just who he had always been to me. I can only pray that he heard me. A month or so later, on the return home from his funeral, I heard Luther's song Dance with My Father for the first time. Once again, my tears flowed freely as I was faced with one more experience I would never have. I would never have the opportunity to dance with my father. What a joy that would have been.